for this edition of Champion Conversations, where we deal with bringing out your inner champion. I am Napoleon Bradford, and I'm so glad to have you on with us tonight. Tonight is a special edition where I have assembled some amazing champions from all over to kind of help us navigate and curate this conversation. But before I begin, I just simply want you to do this. If you're watching, I want you to share this broadcast. And after you share it, I want you to take time in the comments to kind of uh, just write where you're viewing, where you're watching this from. We want to involve you in the conversation, understand this is a safe space, and we want to make sure that you're able to share. We want to make sure you're able to ask questions. We want to make sure you're able to engage our panelists. All right, this is hosted by the Cathedral of Champions, a birthing and becoming place for ministers and ministries. We are here to help develop the inner champion in everyone. So we're glad to have you on. We're glad to have you on, and we're praying for an amazing and enlightening conversation. If you want to connect to us, just simply take out your device, and text the word champion to 84576. Again, that's the word champion to 84576. It's so good to see each and every one of you on. It's so good to see each and every one of you on. But I don't want to belabor the time. I want to make sure that we're able to honor the time that we have together. So I simply want to introduce our panel. I'm going to begin by introducing my co-host, my co-facilitator, the amazing Dr. Jamie Eaddy Chisholm. Thank you for joining the conversation. You're, let's see what's going on.
It says my mic is still muted, but it would be great if people could actually hear me.
Now
So
we
good.
hear you.
Yeah, good evening. I am so glad to be part of this conversation tonight. I think it's really important for us to talk about all of the ways that we deal with death and divorce, and not just of people. And it's especially important during this holiday season. So I'm ready. I'm ready to get started and be with the panel.
Awesome. We're so glad to have you. Let's introduce our first panelist. Our first panelist is one of the members, the founding members of the Cathedral of Champions, and she is a champion. And I want to introduce you to Janine Wilson.
Good evening. Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm so excited to at least talk about my part in my journey as I start from scratch.
Awesome. Next up, I want to introduce to you to my sister, um, and member, indirectly of the Cathedral of Champions. She's had a voice in it, and she's also amazing pastor out of the DC DMV area, uh, Yania Wilkins.
Praise the Lord, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited about sharing my testimony, and I look forward to those being blessed tonight.
Awesome. Next up, my sister from South Carolina, my best friend, and so I'm just so glad to have my best friend on, Nikki Spears.
Good evening to everyone. Part of this journey is new for me, but I'm excited and can't wait to share with you um, about this journey.
Awesome. Now, next up, I have a whole lot of estrogen on the screen, so I need to bring some testosterone on the screen. So I'm going to bring my other best friend, uh, James Watson, on. So, James, come on in the room.
Good evening, everyone. I am excited and elated to be on such a powerful panel tonight, and I am excited. I'm bringing with me just a little, maybe about 11 years of experience from a second marriage, and so I want to just help people as much as I can tonight. So I'm excited. Thank you for having me tonight.
Glad you're here, my brother. Glad you're here. Can't introduce you without introducing your wife. So let's bring Dr. Key on.
Well, good evening, everybody. It is a blessing to be able to share with this phenomenal panel and talk about healing well and the healing process, to be able to triumph after trauma. So hopefully I'll be able to contribute, and I'm definitely coming to learn. So good evening to everybody.
Good evening. I love that. Triumphing after trauma. Man, that's good. That's good. That's good. Let me close out this amazing panel with my other sister, my co-laborer in the chaplaincy, Lieutenant Colonel Michelle Law Gordon. And she was having some technical difficulties, so I may need to bring her back. All right, let me bring her back in just a second. Don't worry about it. We know she's here. Listen, let's hear a little bit of your stories. Let me go in the reverse order that you're on and just hear a little of your story. So let me start with you, Dr. Key.
Yes, sir. Wow, my story. I'm gonna use the title of my book as, because my book speaks to my story, and that's Damaged but Destined, and it talks about the journey and the process, the damages that come. But anybody who's ever had to deal with a car accident, or you can actually sue for damages. So I figure that my life now is me suing the enemy for the damages that he caused, and getting my rewards for the damages, for the trauma that I had to deal with. But I am divorced. I was divorced. I'm remarried to the handsome one that's on the screen with that red, black, and white shirt on. So we've been married now for 11 years. But I've been, if we go for the divorce side of it, was divorced since 2006, 7. Got remarried, but there was a healing process, and a process that God had to take me through, to be able to be prepared to be married again, to be able to handle marriage. I had to heal well. I had to be able to be ready to be a wife in a whole new mindset, in a whole new mind frame, having to be able to marry without penalizing my husband for what had happened to me before. And so in order to do that, there had to be a healing process. I couldn't hold him responsible for the trauma or anything that happened, the sins of another person, because he was somebody different. And so God took me through a healing process. I had to be ready. I had to be whole, because I had already gone through a situation where I married somebody and both of us were broken. And because we were both broken, we caused each other so much damage. This time around, it had to be different. Children were involved. We are a blended family. So now we're talking about both of us, children born in my womb and children born in my heart, and them playing a part in that process. Being able to blend well, to represent God. I told my husband when I met him, I wanted the marriage that God intended when he made Eve for Adam. I wanted what the Garden of Eden was supposed to be before the fall. And that's what we're still trying to build. And we're still trying to build, because at that time we weren't 20. We were, I know I look like I'm 21. Thank y'all. But no, we were set in our ways in some way. And so we had to learn how to live together. And I didn't expect him to be me. So being able to not be married to myself. Some people want to marry themselves. They want people to think like them, act like them. I knew I wasn't married myself. I was marrying literally the polar opposite, but we shared one thing in common, and that was our love for God and our love for one another. And we were willing to make it work. But learning how to do that when we have so many differences and so many things that we're not alike on, but it's working. And we're 11 years in, and we have a contract for 55 years, and they come up for renewal.
Man, you feel you're suing the enemy.
I'm suing the enemy for damages, because there's some trauma, there's some things that I experienced that were not my fault. Now, some stuff was my own stuff, self-inflicted nonsense, sin. Some stuff I caused, but there were some things in my life that I didn't cause. There were some traumas that came up through life, through generation. There was some generational trauma, some generational curses, and he took advantage of those things and used them against me. My first marriage was riddled with pain, riddled with adultery, and I was married to a preacher, and we just did not have a good process. It was a good person that was a bad husband. I'm grateful for what came out of that. I got 2 beautiful children out of that, but it still was a bad process. So you're talking about being married to somebody for 14 years, and 14 of those years were traumatic, and trying to stay together because it was the right thing to do for the church, or trying to stay together because we tried to have a whole house, or what we considered a whole house. And what God told me as we got to the end was whole and healthy were not necessarily synonymous. And I was under the concept that in order to because I wanted my children to have what I didn't have. I wanted them to have both parents. So all of these things I thought I was doing under the pretense of fitting into a label, or fitting into a box. And when God gave me the release of whole and healthy were not synonymous, I knew that my children and I myself would be healthier walking away from that marriage. And it had to happen because it never should have happened to start with, because I wasn't whole when I got married the first time. I had some damages that I needed to deal with. And so I had my ex-husband placed on a pedestal and expected him to do something for me that only God could do. I had unrealistic expectations of him as a person. And there were just some things that he could not do. He had hero syndrome, so he thought he could. And when he failed me, I was not one. My response to that failure was detrimental for us both. And then you couple in that, I thought I didn't know how to forgive. I had to learn how to forgive. Excuse me, but repeat adultery, repeated, became abusive and some other things. So it just was not good for either one of us.
Man, that's amazing. That's an amazing way to kind of process that, Dr. J.
Yeah, just, and we're going to talk about this later, but I want others to think about just 2 things that you said. You had to be ready to be a partner again, right? So for all of us, what does it take? And for those who are watching, really, what does it take for us to be ready after loss, right? Once we experience that loss, whether it's divorce, whether it's the death of someone, whether it's the ending of a dream, what does it take to be ready for the next round? Right? Because it takes, and you talked about losing yourself in order to find yourself, another loss, right? What does it take to be ready for the next round? How much of us do we need to lose to find us so that we are prepared for the partner, the dream, the ministry, and you put whatever you need to put on the next sentence. So just for all of us and for those watching, as you're hearing the stories, I want you to think about some of those things. Thank you, Dr. Key, because I already wrote a couple things down with the introduction.
Man. Bishop J, go ahead and give a little bit of your story.
Yes, sir, my brother. I certainly will. I come in from a perspective of, I grew up in an era where men, if you had a child by a woman, you were told, you're supposed to marry that woman, give that child your last name. So I come in from a perspective where it wasn't until I got into the marriage that I have with my wife now that I realized that I married out of lust and not love. I saw what I thought I liked. I saw what I believe I wanted. But then I also come out this era where I said to myself, well, this is one marriage, one time. I'm not doing it again. And so what happened is, I'm driving over the road, driving tractor trailer for 20 some odd years. And, I asked my first wife, I asked her, I said, what do you need? Do you need a man that's going to stay at home or a man that's going to make you money? So I spent most of my time trying to please somebody based on a financial basis. And so, quite naturally, if you're not in the home and you're not around, then somebody's gonna find other ways and other means. So with that, when when that marriage ended, like my wife said, I did, 2 beautiful children came out of that. Then I was able to get 2 bonus children. I've always called them my bonus children. I never liked the terminology stepfather. Because what is he stepping into? Is he do you realize what you're stepping into? So I wanted them to be bonus. I wanted them to be an addition to what I already had and what I could bring to them from a male figure, father figure. And so as that relationship grew, it allowed me to grow with them, learn them, not having to force the relationship, not feeling like that the relationship was forced on me. And so when I met my wife, Dr. Key, when I met her, she had did something and asked me a question that I had never been asked in the history of me dating. She asked me, what do I need? To the point where I was met, and let me just share this, I was met at the car with a bouquet of flowers when I first met her for our first date, and a book. And now, as a man, this one threw me into something, because she was like, if you really want to get to know me, you're going to have to read this book, and we're going to talk about this book, and here's your flowers. Now I'm crying. Now here I am, grown man at the back of the car crying because she done got me in the car and they gave me a whole dozen of roses. I ain't never had that happen to me. So now I'm like, whoa, this off the cuff is a lot. So when she asked me that question, I really had to think about that question. And what I realized after she asked me, what did I really need? It came down to the point that I needed stability. And so that's what my wife now has provided me. She's provided me with stability, trust. I don't have to, I'm not looking over my shoulders, wondering if the light's gonna get cut off and whether she's gonna be gone up the road with some young buck or something like that. I'm secure now that she is, my stability. And so I also learned in that, and I'll share this really quick. In the first marriage, my wife now asked me another question. She asked me, what did you do wrong? I said, what? She said, no, you can tell me all the things that she did wrong. What did you do wrong that caused this marriage to end? And I had to think about that thing. She was like, take all the time you need, write it down if you have to, but you have to tell me so I can get a better understanding of the person that I'm with. And so she did something that totally amazed me. My wife took me on a trip for 24 hours that I think turned into 48 hours. And she was like, I need you to spend 48 hours, 24 hours with me without your cell phone, without any, let your kids know where you're going. Let them know I ain't taking you off nowhere and going to throw you in the river, nothing like that. But let everybody know where you're going to be. And if you're willing to do this, then I think we may have something, because she let me know up front she was not girlfriend material and she was wife material. So I had to bow down and figure out, am I going to marry her, or I'm going to just, let this be? I guess I had to figure out, is this ministry or this marriage? And I understood from very, very, from the very beginning that this was meant to be marriage.
Man, you said something very amazing, and I know Dr. J is going to jump in there, but you said that she asked you, first of all, what do you need, right? What
Yes,
do
sir.
you need? And then secondly, she asked you to own your part. What did you do wrong?
What did you do? What did I do wrong?
What did you do wrong? Wow.
Right.
Go ahead, Dr. J.
Yeah, because for all of us, entering into relationships is part of the requirement is that we're able to take an honest assessment of who we are and what we've done, right? Because the truth is, we do bring stuff with us. Sometimes we cause trouble in relationships because we weren't healed from something that our parent did, said, withheld, right? And so being able to, one, actually ask someone what you do, because sometimes we swallow our own voices because we fear losing out on the thing, whatever the thing might be. We fear losing out, so we swallow our voices. But for both of us to be alive in this thing and to thrive and to be well, I got to really be able to speak up and say, you know, Bishop, what you do, and take what you say, your accountability, and also not hold that against you. And I'll be really candid as we navigate this space today. My husband and I'm learning how I know what happened yesterday, right? With not being able to communicate well, right? With pushing away from one another, and then saying, okay, listen, I figured out why I'm doing that. Here I am ready now for me not to hold that against him as we move forward. So again, thank you both for talking to us about how we can navigate loss and how we can do it together, because it requires letting go of some stuff. Bishop, I know when she asked you to figure out what you did wrong, you had to look at yourself in the mirror. You had to decide, what am I willing to lose? Because I'm gonna have to let some of this stuff go, right? What am I willing to lose to gain what I believe is going to be my blessing? And so thank you both for helping us, you know, start this conversation about navigating loss, navigating trauma. What does it take to heal? For those of you who are listening, right? Think about that. What are you willing to let go? What assumptions about how relationships are supposed to be? What assumptions are you willing to let go of? What assumptions are you willing to let go about how other people should be in life? Like, what are you willing to let go of? Because some things we're holding on to are choking the life out of us, which means it's also going to choke the life out of our relationship. What are you willing to lose in order to be whole and healthy? And so thank you both for starting this. I know we got some more introductions to do. So let me mute again so we can get these introductions.
Man, this is so good, right? This is so good. And you said it amazingly. But my sister is back with us, and I want to give her a chance to introduce herself and say her hellos, and go ahead and tell your story while you jump on. Michelle Law Gordon.
Okay, so I'm Michelle Law Gordon. I am a widow of 6 years, but I have also been engaged since becoming a widow, and realized that it wasn't time yet, and had to let that go. Have dated, and it's been interesting. And even in listening to the conversations thus far and talking about what are you willing to let go of, I think that there's also the issue of what are you not willing to let go of, and what standards are you not willing to lower? Because what I realize is that I was in an amazing marriage that was cut short far too soon. I was married for 6 years and 9 months before I lost my husband to a heart attack. But as I said, it was an amazing marriage. I got married at late because I was 41, and there were some standards that were set that I'm not willing to lower in order to marry again. So from that regard, I think that we have to also know what is it that we want. Because when I met my husband, I said to him, what are you looking for, a wife or a girlfriend? Because I'm about to be 40 and I'm wife material. So I knew that going in, and that has not changed. But having married him, he showed me some things that I deserve as a wife and as a woman that I'm not willing to settle for not having. So.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So for all of us, please don't think being willing to lose, to let go of that which no longer serves you well,
right,
that which hinders your healing and your wholeness, is not letting go of your standards,
right,
and what you know, right? If this is what you know you need in a relationship,
mm-hmm.
then if the person is not right, bring that, being willing to hear the voice, because what y'all know there's a spirit in us that's speaking. Sometimes we don't listen. I don't know about you. Sometimes, right? The spirit speaks and you're like, let me just try one. Let me try it this way. Let me enter it. Let me go through the other door and see what I can see. But you've helped us. Yes, absolutely. For those who have experienced loss, I know sometimes the desire is to fill the void immediately. Like something's missing. I want to fill this. I want to fill this. Be really cautious about lowering your standards so that you can fill a hole that truthfully will never be filled.
Mhm.
Right? It will. Your husband, the part of you that that piece, right, that hole, and I'm calling it a hole. We can call it whatever. That part will never be filled. We learn how to live with that.
Mhm.
We learn how to live with the loss. If you are rushing to fill, right, just know that it's a bottomless hole. You're going to keep pouring into it, but you'll never be satisfied if you're seeking to fill what you think is missing in this moment. And so thank you for being in this space. And then thank you for reminding us to have some standards as we move through. And don't be, listen, I know it can be lonely. I get it, right? It's holiday season, it's cold, depending on where you are. Right? I know, right? All these things we don't want to be alone. But be really intentional with who we allow into the space, because just trying to fill what's missing might create some other holes in you. So, Bishop, I'll let us keep going with the introductions, because I don't know how long we're gonna be here tonight, but I feel like we're gonna be here for a long time.
Listen, this is so eye-opening just in the introductions. So let me jump to Nikki. Go ahead, Nick.
Good evening again. My name is Nikki Spears, and I can hit it from both sides, divorce as well as I just lost my spouse a little over 4 months ago. He was a pastor, so having to be a caretaker at this present moment, I am like transitioning to rediscover Nikki after Michael. And with that, we've been married for 16 years. Before that, I was married for 5 years. Even during the death, and I know I'm probably skipping over, but just to get to the where I am now, even dealing with the first divorce, after I got my divorce, thought that's where I was supposed to be. Like Bishop said, you see the outside, and that's what you want. Um, at the end of that divorce, God said, I get that's what you wanted, but that's not what I had for you. Met Michael, and we had a blended family. And like I said, he was a minister when I met him, so we kind of jumped right into ministry. And then even with Michael and having to rediscover me now, when I met Michael, I was dating God, but being in that marriage had allowed me to have a relationship with God. So that marriage was meant to be, and I know, because if I didn't have that peace, I wouldn't be where I'm at and have the strength to be able to carry on like I am now. So I thank God first of all, but just like I said, it's new to me. It's only been 4 months, so just trying to rediscover Nikki. And I lost him. We Michael battled or had complications with sickle cell. So I'm not going to say lost, because God always get the victory. So I'm not going to say lost. But having to be a caretaker, first leading lady, and just basically in a day that's gone. So now I have to rediscover me, as far as my spiritual growth, because he was my covering. So I have to, rediscover Nikki, and that's what I'm doing, holding on to the memories. They will not go anywhere, but at the same time, God still has an assignment for me to do, and I will continue to seek God for that assignment.
Thank you for being on.
Yeah, and it's like not only does God have an assignment for us, right? Something that God wants all of us to do, but I don't believe that it is God's intention for us to not live in joy, right? And so, um, those of you who have, if you're watching and you're familiar with Thoughtful Transitions, Nikki says something that we focus on when we are helping people or communities navigate loss. What does it mean to rediscover yourself? Because ultimately, as you get to a certain point, there is some rediscovery that has to take place. There is some um, figuring out where I fit again, figuring out is it the spot over here, or have I moved to a new place? It's rediscovering what do I like again, because sometimes the things that we used to do, the places that we used to go, we stopped going, we stopped doing, we stopped being, we stopped becoming, and there's no shame in that. It might be part of our process. And so there comes a point where we have to sit back and say, all right, now it's time to rediscover me again. And so, Nikki, thank you for reminding us of that. And that's a hard work when it's time to start rediscovering yourself again. Because it's do I go on the do I take the trip to the place that we used to go all the time? We loved, I'm gonna say, like, we love the Dominican Republic. Do I want to go? Will is that betrayal because I'm gonna go and enjoy myself? Like, what does it mean to rediscover me after after a loss? A loss only in that they are not physically with us. I believe that sort of my ancestors, those who have been connected to me, are always here. I name them in spaces because they're here. But trying to rediscover yourself can be a challenging work. So I'm glad that you have community. All right. I already know you have community that's here to support you. But for all of us thinking about what does it mean to rediscover ourselves after a loss? And let me go on mute.
Okay. Yania, I know you've been biting at the bit. I think you've been mentally jotting some notes down. So let's hear your story.
Yes, yes. Praise God. Yes. Just like Nikki, I'm coming from both dynamics. The first being, I met my husband when I was 18 years old. I married my husband when I was 21 years old, and I stayed married to him until I was 31. And so from my early or late teen years and all of my 20s, I spent being married. Marriage is always difficult. I married a person who was a detective in the DMV area. I also married someone that already had 3 daughters. And so I walked into an already made family in a sense when I took on that responsibility as a young woman. And we went through our challenges, of course. I mean, I think when you're young and you come from different cultures and different time spaces and things of that nature, you're faced with so much. But I lost my spouse in 2008 due to brain cancer. He went to work one morning, was called into roll call, took a call, and the detectives had to go looking for him because he lost his memory while he was trying to take a call. And so he was diagnosed with brain cancer in October, and it wasn't a prolonged timing. I mean, within 6 weeks, he expired and transitioned rather quickly. And so from October to December was all that we had of him. And during that time, his memory of how to pronounce our names and things of that nature had been taken from him. And so, as a 31-year-old woman who only knew this person from the age of 18, I had to learn how to do everything, learn how to pay bills and not depend on him to be there to kind of save us and protect us and provide for us. So definitely had to, lean on God and lean on my church community to give me understanding of now why am I in this situation where I have three daughters that I have to raise now as a single widow, as a new minister in Christ, and how to do all of that without a husband, especially coming from a very rigid and a very I guess a very religious background, who really, predicated a lot of things, especially leadership, on marriage. And so how do I now navigate that, being a young minister and having young children and not being labeled after being with a spouse for so long. But my testimony really is I am at this place in my life trusting God with God removing the sting of death. Because after losing my husband in 2008, I thought I was free from the experience of death. And 2014, I experienced the loss of a best friend in April. I experienced the loss of my grandmother in June. And then I experienced the loss of my aunt in July, in which I was the one that had to make the decision to remove her off of life support. And then I lost a cousin and an uncle of that year of 2014. And I think what God has been ministering to me is that as long as you allow your mind to be in Christ Jesus, that he can regulate your thoughts to the point that you won't lose your mind. Because for most people in death, not only do you not know who you are, but that is an opportunity for the enemy to begin to play tricks on your mind and begin to tell you that your life isn't worth it, or you won't be able to recover, things of that nature. And as I begin to navigate out of that space, 2016 arose, and my uncle, he was living at a facility here in the DMV area, and I was called because he had transitioned in his sleep, and I had to identify his body. And shortly thereafter, my brother was killed in a car accident in January of 2017. And then my mother died on the same day, 1 year later, of January in 2018. 1 month later, a person proposed to me. I accepted the proposal, and I did it because I needed to feel comfort. I wanted to feel like I had family, because when you've lost so much, you don't want to lose, and you don't want to lose anymore. You get tired of losing people. So your loyalty, even if you're a loyal person, you begin to really give people grace, sometimes even in spaces where they don't deserve it, or they haven't proven themselves, just because you want that comfort, or you want those voids, as Dr. Jamie mentioned, you want those voids to be fulfilled. But I thank God, because while I was in the process of planning this wedding, the Lord was speaking to me every step of the way. And 2 weeks prior to that wedding, I called the wedding off. And it was probably one of the most courageous things that I had ever done. But I did it with the power of God, the strength of God, and the faith of God, because I recognized that God had brought me all the way from my first death experience of 2008 all the way to 2018. And if he kept my mind through all of that, I knew God would be able to keep me, preserve me, restore me. And one of the most phenomenal things is that I have recovered in areas that I never thought that I would ever be able to recover. And some people don't recover, they don't bounce back. But God has been giving me so many healing mind hacks, that through his word, to keep our mind focused and stayed on him, that we don't allow our mind to get lost in the the losses that we experience. And so these are just some of the things that I've experienced. And I'm able now to try and minister to others who've experienced loss on this great magnitude. And through this process, understand why God pulled me to the forefront of all of these losses and allowed me to come out, where some people, were not able. I'm glad to be one of the ones who was able to conquer and defeat, the sting of death, and giving, praise and glory to God, knowing that he was with me every step of the way.
Whew, powerful.
Yeah, just the testimony, right? The testimony. I often share with people that if you lose everything, if it's just you and God, you have enough to start all over again.
Mm-hmm.
You have enough to experience joy. You have enough to pursue ministry. And I am grateful that you are telling us tonight that that sting that comes with death and loss, that it doesn't always have to sting. It might not, the sting might not go away overnight, right? You're talking about a 10-year process for you. So for those of you who are listening, who are thinking that you're gonna get off this live and tomorrow, right? You know, Pastor told us, she's telling us about a 10-year process of navigating and experiencing more losses and navigating and experiencing more losses and trusting God. And I'm not going to talk about the other emotions, right? But you know, I don't know. It might have been some anger in there somewhere. It might have been some disappointment, frustration in there as you had to process your way through to this place today. So if nothing else, know that healing and restoration is possible, right? If you look on your screen, you see what says 8 squares right now, at least, that are reminding you that healing and restoration is possible after loss. It doesn't mean that we get the thing or the person in this sense, right, back, but we get the pieces of ourselves that may have been lost, may have even died in us, that God can heal and can awaken and can restore those places in us as we lean as best we can on God in the midst of our loss. I know we still have another intro. Thank you, Pastor, for sharing that testimony. For real, I'm excited. If I wasn't sitting on the floor, I might run around a bit, but I gotta get off this floor first.
Man. So we're gonna close out our introductions with my beloved sister Janine Wilson.
Good evening, everyone. First, let me say I'm twice divorced, and I'm not going to talk about their part of it. I'm going to talk about my part of it. I can honestly say now that I was suffering with an identity crisis. I did not know who I was. Um, First marriage, because you're taught early on that you're supposed to get married. You're supposed to go to school, find a husband, be a housewife. My father walked out on my mom when I was in junior high school. And that played a big part in the failure of my first marriage because I got married thinking that that was the right thing to do. But then I married someone that was familiar to me. He had tendencies like my father did. And don't get me wrong, I love my dad to pieces. But I didn't feel like I deserved anything more than what my father gave my mom. Didn't have any children when I got married. Walked out of that marriage with 2 beautiful children. Love my babies dearly. My second marriage, which ended July the 15th of this year. Um, and when I say I'm happily divorced, people look at me like I'm crazy. But the marriage was toxic because I was still in the middle of my identity crisis. I was fighting with the world, trying to have a voice. I was fighting within the church, trying to have a voice. So, God said, don't marry him. My pastor at the time said, you need to. Instantly regretted it. Stayed married in the house for 4 years, and it progressively got worse. And it got worse because the more I learned me, the more I knew I couldn't stay there. The more the closer I grew to God, the further he went away from God. And it was just like, for my salvation, I have to leave. And I literally walked away with nothing physically, but I gained a whole spiritual kingdom and a whole spiritual awakening. And my identity crisis was gone because I finally accepted who I was. I finally accepted that although my voice may not be received by everyone, it would be received by someone. So leaving that marriage, I had to heal during the marriage before I could leave the marriage. And I don't know if that makes sense to anyone, but because it was so toxic, and it was toxic on both ends initially. And I'm not going to put all of the blame on him, because I was still struggling with me. And because I was struggling with me, I allowed myself to participate in things that I knew I shouldn't have participated in. So in order for me to leave the marriage, I had to know that I was worth more than what I had at that point in time. And if my partner at the time did not want to grow with me, I knew I had to grow without him. So that's basically where I am right now. I'm happy and I'm at peace. And while I'm saying I'm at peace, that doesn't mean that I'm not tried and tested every single day. I just know that I don't have to participate in any dysfunction because I've been delivered from all of that. I know how to use my voice, and I know how to speak and not argue. I know how to say things and not say it in a way where I'm intentionally trying to hurt your feelings. I'm intentional about how I communicate and how and it's just in any relationship, not just that I'm intentional about me representing God to the best of my ability and not allowing myself to get down in the dirt and get dirty when my God told me to stay clean.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you so much. Two things I want to say, and then Pastor Bradford, you can take it from there. Two things I want to say that you said to us. One, that in your healing, you were healing in, had to heal in enough in order to get out to continue to heal. Right? That's what you said to us, that I was in it. I couldn't leave though. So there was something, I was tangled in some ways with the toxicity, with the trauma, with whatever else was present. I was tangled up in some way with it. So I had to do some healing first in order to become disentangled and get out to continue my healing. That's one thing you said to us. And then the second thing, and I think this is the one that made me shout, was that I now have peace. And you said, but let me just be clear. It doesn't mean that every day is right. It doesn't mean that you are smiling in a sense, like every day is filled with laughter. Peace. I think some of us think that because we say we have peace, that there also means that there is absent of trouble or absent of, sometimes grief, or absent of, you name it. That's not what it is when people are talking about, at least from what you're saying, that you have peace. It is, I am confident that I did and am doing what Spirit, where God is leading me. I am confident that the decision I made was to save my life, the life that God wants to use in ministry, but not just, let's think beyond just, right, just God wants to use. And I still might have some bad days, but I know that I'm where God would have me. That's peace, based on how I heard you say it. I have peace. It don't mean that every day is a great day, but I know I'm where God wants me to be. I know that the peace is that God won't leave me regardless of where I am. That's the peace. It's not that I'm enjoying sometimes the stigma that comes from divorce, right? Because y'all know people talk about us. Y'all know, listen, people will smile and be like, hey, how you doing today, Janine? Good to see you. Good to see she, right? Y'all know, let's just be clear that this is how some folks, some of our cousins and them act, right? But peace is, I know y'all might talk about me, but I did exactly what I needed to do to live whole and healthy, which is God's intention for us. Anyway, so thank you, Janine. Pastor, I'm gonna turn it over to you, and we can, if we have questions, I'm not sure. I'm gonna go to the chat and see if anybody's asking anything.
Man, so again, the reason this is so important is because, and the reason, even though we seem like we have a heavy panel, it's because everybody's experience is so different, right? But But I want to go to the root of the presentation, which is, what did from scratch look like for you? And I don't know who wants to go first, but when you think about that point where you decided that you were going to, I think David after the death of the baby, mourned, and then eventually he washed his face, worshiped, and decided to go back to Bathsheba. At what point did you decide to remove the sackcloth, remove the ashes, and really start from scratch? What did that look like for you? I don't know who's gonna go first, but just talk about it.
Bless you, Pastor Bradford. I know for me, once I called off the wedding, it was some things happening. God was revealing to me as the wedding was fastly approaching. And when I got the courage to call off the wedding, I remember being in a meeting at work, and I sent a text message calling off the wedding. But I realized that from the proposal of the wedding, which was a month after we laid my mother to rest, and we were planning to get married 6 months after we laid my mother to rest. So I was actually planning to get married on July 17th of 2018. And 2 weeks prior to, decided to call the wedding off. But my emotional, mental, and psychological stability from the time my mother passed up until that point, I was just no good. I really wasn't. I had placed the church on a sabbatical. I was suffering in the workplace. And part of this was because I was not grieving properly. I was taught to work over it, work through it, and stay busy. And so I was using activity as a way to avoid pain and grieving properly. And so I was loading myself up with more and more activity until I just hit a crash. When I called the wedding off, a week later, I ended up having an anxiety attack. And I had those answers. I had those questions. I'm sorry. I had the questions. God, I understand death, but you need to help me understand what was your purpose in all of this. If I understand your purpose, then maybe I could process it a little better. And I was struggling with that because one of my family members, and I'm the only preacher. Some of you guys come from generational preachers and teachers and so forth. But for me, I don't. And so one of my cousins during this process had asked me right before this anxiety attack, I need you to tell me why God did this. And me being, named amongst, those prophets that was accurate, it literally shattered me to the point that it sent me into an anxiety. And after that, I began seeking. I wanted to see God. I was seeking counseling. I began seeking answers. At that point, I didn't want to be busy anymore. I didn't want the activity. I didn't want the cliches, not to disrespect the church, but I just didn't want the playfulness of using some of the same sentences that we hear over and over and over again. I really needed some answers because I knew that if I didn't get the answers, that I wasn't going to be able to recover. So for me, from scratch, it looked like I put the church on pause. I took a break from work, and I began seeking clinical counseling, spiritual clinical counseling, and a grief counselor to help me understand some of the things that I was experiencing that I had never. This platform tonight is the first time that some of my family, my friends, or my children would ever hear these stories, because through those 10 years, I felt that I had to be strong for everyone in my family. I had to be the spiritual representative for everyone in my family. And I had to hold it together so that their faith in God wouldn't crumble. So, presently, what I had to project to them is you know, God knows what he's doing, even though I didn't know what God was doing, because I didn't want their faith or their trust in God to be diminished by their experience. But ultimately, I took the hit. And so when I realized what was necessary is I went to a clinical counselor. I'm sorry if I'm a little long-winded, but I went to a clinical counselor and I told her about some dreams that I had. And I said, these dreams prophetically to me doesn't make sense because these people have already transitioned. And she gave me an activity, and the activity brought forth so much clarity in scripture that I just began to go through my phase of healing without trying to put that off or without trying to avoid it. And so that's where my journey started. And then I realized not only would that person would have wrecked my life, but I would have wrecked their life even had I would have gotten married, because the reality was there was nothing that God was ordaining for me and that person. I only had them there as a placeholder to provide comfort. And it wasn't the comfort that I needed. God was trying to get my attention and trying to speak to me also, and try to speak to my family also on another level. And so my ground zero reset of where I said this has to stop was when everything was crumbling around me. I had no control over any of it. And I knew at that point I had to seek for healing and some answers.
Yeah. And can I just say, I hope those of you who are watching took note there, that we can become so busy during our after loss season that we don't even allow our own healing. That churchy cliches, all of those things, really, that it has no power. Those cliches really have no power over our ability to heal. Sometimes we just need some very raw, authentic space where God can speak, perhaps where a counselor or a therapist or a grief coach can speak, but it needs to be where we are intentional about feeling what we feel. Because sometimes, y'all know, if I can just use this, that strong Black woman, one word, that we've been told we can't show emotion, we can't show sadness, we can't show all of these things, all of which we experience. And when we swallow it, what happens? It impacts our bodies. And so I hear you saying, one, you gave yourself permission to feel all those things, to take all of that to God, to seek God, but to seek God not just through God's word, but through people who are trained to help us with our psychosocial, our emotional and mental health. But I wonder, especially for those who are watching, I wonder what kind of space we would be setting up for our loved ones if we actually let them in on some of the journey, right? And based on what you said, you're like, wait a minute, I finally had to say, this is what it really is. I no longer have the power to fake what's happening. I no longer have the strength to put that mask on every day, to pretend that maybe all is well, to press my way through. Not saying we don't press, but pressing in a way that doesn't give space for our humanity as well can be toxic too for our healing. So thank you for sharing that. I really want people to hear that sometimes it is not about the cliches. Sometimes it is not about the pretending. Sometimes it's about literally climbing down into the hole, sitting there for a minute, and allowing the spirit to speak, to give us enough strength to be able to climb back out. And sometimes we have help pulling us out the hole. But when we force ourselves into busyness and disregard how we might be feeling, when we force ourselves into ministry because we like ministry is a good thing. Yeah, it can be a good thing, but not if you are doing damage to yourself in the process of trying to do a good thing for others. And then what are we teaching people about grieving when we don't allow them to see what it really looks like, right? What do we teach our young children about what it means to navigate loss when I experience a loss and I pretend ain't nothing happened? And I'm not saying you pretended, but just in general, what happens when we do that? And so thank you for sharing that. And I know we're still, the question on the table is what did from scratch. I'm sorry, Pastor, go ahead. You wanted to chime in on that one.
But I think the other interesting thing she said, which is what many of us have wrestled with, is because we represent Christ and we get traumatic hits. Why do we often feel the need to suppress our real hurt, our real pain, in an effort to prove that God still loves us and God is in control? When, to be honest, in lost encounters, we're sometimes mad as hell at God. We're sometimes real angry with God, but because we represent the church, quote unquote, in our minds, we often hide or oppress or suppress our feelings to try to put on a good face for people because we think being strong proves our faithfulness.
Right.
Right.
And we got to redefine strong.
Yeah.
Strong is not, there is strength in allowing people to see your tears. There is strength in coming to folk and saying, guess what? I actually don't have the answer today. I don't know. All I know is that I'm hurting and that I'm believing that God is with me. Right. The word says that God won't leave or forsake me. I'm going to hold that as true, even if I don't feel it in this moment. Sometimes that is the strength, is allowing people to see who we really are and that God has not left us even when we are at our most vulnerable, our lowest, or what we consider our weakest point.
Yeah.
Okay. I won't be long because like I said, I'm new at this. But my from scratch right now is I'm in a season of silence. So do I go here? Do I go right? Do I go left? If I go here and I'm dealing with, okay, what will they think about this if I do this? Coming from being a leading lady in a church, I mean, and when my husband was sick, um, having to step up and just making sure that his part is being done. The church that I was in, wonderful church. If they allowed me to be able to help him when he wasn't able to help himself, and make sure that we have things in place for ministry to continue to run. But it was just an eye opener for me, and traumatic as far as when he passed. I was like, I could still carry on, but then it hit me a month later. It's like, it's not the same. You're not in the same position anymore. He's not the pastor anymore. So my scratch right now is a season of silence. God is like, nope, just stay right here. I will show you what to do. And part of it too is some of the things that, because I was a caregiver, it's like if you have a what is it, a list that you want to do, that's what I'm doing now. And to be honest with you, that person can look at me and say, well, that's not the Nikki I know. Well, I'm rediscovering Nikki. God hasn't left me. I haven't left him, but it's just I'm in a season of silence. So some people can look and say, well, she's there or she's gone this place. Yes, I am. And that's just a part of rediscovering me. As far as the church, I haven't been there in like a month, but sometimes do I want to go? Yes. And then sometimes I'm just like, I can't get there, but I will go visit other churches because I have to find out what it is, where Nikki is supposed to be. So like I said, my title right now, my theme is a season of silence.
Thank you. Janine, I saw you come. I'm going to go ahead. Go ahead, Janine.
My from scratch is being intentional about removing the triggers that causes my trauma. I've been church hurt. I've been family hurt. I've been man hurt. And for so long, I used that as a crutch. to make excuses for, not that my behavior was bad, but for the bad decisions that, I made, trying to justify to God, seeking man's validation and not God's validation. And because of that, I've been hurt a whole lot. So my from scratch is starting over literally from nothing, because when I walked away from my ex-husband, I walked away with nothing because he did not want me to leave. So it was all about physical things for him. It wasn't about physical things for me. It was all emotional. So my from scratch is being intentional about removing the triggers that causes my trauma.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Those triggers, those places where they're familiar to us, and if we're not intentional, we can find ourselves back into relationships in some cases, back doing some activities just because it's familiar. And so the strength is being able to be honest enough with ourselves to say that this is something that I need to change, and then honoring ourselves by not engaging anymore. It's hard to let go of things that are familiar. But if your healing depends on it, and I hear you talking about not re-engaging your trauma, not going to the place that's going to awaken, not going to the place that's going to cause me to, I'm going to use the term backslide, but I hope you'll understand what I mean, like to go back to, right? Like we don't always have to revisit our pain. There are some things that we can leave behind, that we can literally just walk away from, and there's no need to keep going back. There's no need to go back and peek and just to let me just go and look at it again. So thank you for sharing that. I know I'm excited. I'm ready to hear Dr. Key or Bishop J also sort of share your individual from scratch moments.
Did you want me to lead the floor to you, baby, or do you want me to go first? Okay. Well, listen, from my standpoint, starting from scratch was like watching my mother put fresh flour on the table and making bread from scratch. What I had to come to terms with and come to grips with was Dr. Lance Watson out of St. Paul's Baptist Church in Richmond, Virginia, preached a powerful sermon when I was going through my most difficult moments of divorce. He preached a sermon called I'm Bitter, and he preached it from the standpoint of David and Ahithophel. And one of the things he stated in this sermon that really helped me get on the processing table to move me forward was, he said that if anger is the fruit, then bitterness is the root. And so when he said that, I realized that if I was to start again, I was going to have to get rid of the bitterness of what I felt like this relationship stole from me. I was bitter. I was heartbroken. I was torn. I mean, from a male's perspective, pride had set in so deep that how could this happen to me? How I'm the person who felt like, when I got married, this was going to be the only marriage. I'm not getting back in another marriage. Starting from scratch wasn't even on the table. But once I heard that message, I literally broke down, and I realized that in his weakness and my weakness, he is strong. So I really took that message to heart. I'll always remember that message, because that was the restarting place for me. That was a place that once I realized that I was more bitter than I was deeper rooted in bitterness than I was in anger. And anger was just the fruit. I even had this saying that, the next time I get married, if I get married again, I'm a married for money. I ain't married for love. And so all of that pain was just building and driving me and cultivating me. And so Scratch started to look like, scratch all of that and let me show you what love looks like. Love looks like her. Love looks like a mate, a helpmate that says, I'm going to, my wife says this to me all the time, I'm going to take your dreams and I'm going to carry them in my womb and I'm going to birth them. That's what help meet looks like to me. So scratch for me started when God said, let me show you what real love look like. Look into me, and when you look into me, then I'm gonna give you the help me that you need. That's gonna help meet every need that you have. So if you're in pain, if you're listening tonight and you're in pain, you're in the process, you're trying to figure out, what the scratch starts from me. Scratch starts from me the moment I can get it in my mind. Am I angry with the situation? Am I angry with God? Am I angry with the people that got me to this place? Or am I bitter? What is it? Am I just angry, or am I deeply rooted in bitterness? And when he preached that message, man, it revolutionized my whole thought process. And I was like, I would never be that bitter again in my life, because that's a cold place. That's a hard place. So strength for me as a man is not in my biceps and my muscles and what I can lift. Strength for me is in my mind now. Now that I've renewed my mind. My mind says I'm stronger in my belief. I'm stronger in my faith. I'm stronger in making sure my family goes first. I'm stronger in making sure that I even take care of my own physical body, my own physical spiritual makeup, to make sure that I'm surviving, so I don't put that weariness on somebody. So I gotta learn how to go to the doctor. And I'm gonna cut this off in just a minute, but honestly, man, I hadn't even been to the doctor like talking about until I met my wife. So, and I know you probably saying he giving her a lot of credit. Yes, because she cut me off from she helped me get delivered from some places in my life that I knew that I should have been out of a long time ago. And I probably would have been a much better person, even if we've never gotten married. If I'd have had a strong friendship with her, then she really cultivated me to show me how to operate as a man, how to be the whole totality of who you are as a person. So yeah, that's what my scratch looked like. My scratch looked like when I got off the table of bitterness.
Listen. Listen. First of all, we're gonna talk about the bitterness and anger. We're gonna talk about that. But you said, if she was just my friend. Like, I want people to get that part. Like, yeah, she's my wife. Got it. If this ain't the way it went and we were just friends, that my life would still be a whole, like, she would be a gift to me if she was my friend. That's
Listen,
what we
Dr.
need
Taylor,
in our lives. Go ahead, Bishop.
Dr. Taylor, let me just, since you said if she was just my friend, up until Dr. Napoleon, it was just her and I. She was my friend. I now have what I can say, 2 friends in the whole world.
Yes. And then Bishop, let me just say, right, that unhealed anger. So, there are things that make us angry, right? We know that. That's life. There are things that make us angry. But then, even if that, and sometimes we angry with God, sometimes we angry with the people, sometimes we're angry and disappointed in ourselves. And if that seeps in and we begin to sort of dig down into that anger, and it becomes bitterness, that bitterness chokes us. It chokes the life out of us. Nothing can grow in us, with us, when bitterness is present. And so whatever losses we've experienced, those of you who are listening, whether that is because someone has died and they're no longer here with us physically, whether you had a breakup or a divorce, if we allow ourselves, go get that sermon. Dr. Lance Watson so go find that sermon that he just told us to go listen to. But when bitterness takes root, we have to climb. If not, we kill everything around us. We have the potential to kill everything. Relationships don't grow when bitterness is choking the life out of it. We don't grow when bitterness is choking the life out of us. And sometimes we have experienced so many losses. Pastor Wilkins talked about loss after loss after loss after loss. Sometimes we can experience so many losses. And when we don't have the space to be real about how we feel, because sometimes the bitterness comes because we've been holding in, swallowing all the feeling, trying to let everybody know we all right. Creating a safe space, cultivating a space where people can actually come and be who they are without shame, knowing that God is still with us. Oh man, you have helped somebody today. You helped me. I'm hoping you helped more than one person, but you helped me today thinking about what are the places in my own life where the root of bitterness is trying to peek up in there, right? Choking something, choking the beginnings of the birth of my dream, choking the possibility in my ministry, because I'm not just angry. I'm not just angry, but I've swallowed the anger. I'm angry with God, y'all, me. I've swallowed it. How much before us can we accomplish if we actually acknowledge that maybe the thing that's keeping us back, that's holding us back, is that we are bitter? Dr. Key, I know, let me pause and you go ahead and jump on into that and help us see what just being a friend to somebody. Some of us have had people extend friendships to us, but we don't like to listen. We have had people with wisdom extend friendship to us, provide wise counsel, but we don't want to hear that, and so we rather sit in the bitterness, in the anger. I'm gonna stop. Go ahead, Dr. Key.
Thank you, Dr. Jamie. You have given such wisdom to every person's perspective and experiences. I don't know which area to speak to. It's so many different things that I'm gonna go with the original question. I'm gonna stay in the box and leave it alone. I'm gonna put my prophetic all the way over there by the window, so all the way over there. But from scratch means so many different things for me. I had to start from scratch with 2 children. But from scratch, these modern cooks, I grew up, my grandmother taught me how to cook. I grew up in a house and everything was cooked from scratch. And so that means there were different ingredients. There was no measure. And so I had to literally start from scratch. I had to take all the things that I thought it could not be pre-made. So it couldn't be somebody else's idea of what it's going to look like. It could not come from a store. So it couldn't be store bought. It had to be from scratch. And from scratch was God's original plan, intent, and purpose for my life. The good thing for me is that I didn't grow up in the church. I got to know God before I got to know church. So I didn't really have to worry about the church's perspective on my walk with God. It was me and God anyway. From scratch for me was also coming out of a marriage that left me broke. I broke and broken. So no money, homeless with kids, and trying to figure out how to make it happen with them, because what could not happen was that my kids could not experience what was not their fault. And then I also had to deal with the brokenness that I had been carrying with me from childhood, in addition to newfound brokenness. And so everything had to be scratched. Every idea, every concept of what I thought marriage was going to look like, every idea and concept of who I thought I was going to be, this picket fence, all the things, the good and the bad, I had to scratch all of that and go back to God. God, what was your original intent and purposes, not for anybody else, but for me? I tried to fill it. I tried to fill the void. I tried to do the rebound relationship. And let me tell y'all, when you tell God, I want to do it your way, he'll break your stuff up. So I was married to a preacher before. I was like, I'm not married to another preacher. Give me a sinner. Give me somebody that's a straight up sinner. That's how I'm going to do this, because clearly the church thing don't work. And God, with his great self, sent the sinner man that I just thought, sent the man a dream. And the man said, oh, I had a dream. And God told me not to deal with you. And I was like, you don't even know Jesus like that. That was my response. You don't even know Jesus like that. And he was like, what you do. So when God started speaking to sinners about you, then you know, okay, I have to submit to God's will. So it was a process. Okay, God, don't give me what I want. Give me what I need. So I had to start from scratch. And then God told me to write a list. Give me what you want, but also tell me what you don't want. He said, because I can give you everything you want, but it can be wrapped up in what you don't want. And so God made me really deal with me. He wouldn't let anybody in my life, and everybody I tried to put in place, he would break it up. So I had to start from scratch. And then my children had to watch the process, which means I had to date well in front of my children who also had a father. So now I'm teaching them how to navigate, because I wasn't in a fight with him as a father. I was in a disagreement with him as an ex-husband. So how do I now show my children how to have a healthy relationship with somebody I don't agree with? And what I was not going to do was use my children as pawns. I don't play those games. I know what that looked like. I'd seen that. So my children had to learn how to be in both. They had to be able to love us both freely. So I had to teach them that, which was not something that I had seen growing up. I'd seen people fight over kids. I'd seen people use kids. So everything I learned had to be detoxed and broken through my own life. From there, from scratch was now I had to rebuild my life, and my daughter and my son have to have a front seat to that. That meant I didn't have there weren't going to be a whole lot of uncles, although I saw uncles. Won't going to be all that wasn't coming in my house. So how do I show my children how to date well while I'm trying to teach them about God, while I'm trying to rebuild myself? And they have to walk this process with me. My son was in school, and he wrote an essay, y'all. And the essay was some essay he won. I heard about him winning some award, and it was on the wall. I did not realize that the essay he wrote was about me and what he was witnessing about my life. And so here, me trying to go through privately, my son writes this essay that goes all throughout the state of Virginia. It becomes this award-winning essay. And he's talking about seeing his mother go through, but still be strong, seeing his mother go through, but still keep them. They never knew they were lacking. I'm not realizing what they're watching. So now I'm having to, from scratch, show my children how to survive, how to love God when you don't have everything. I love God, but y'all had questions. I never told my kids you couldn't have questions. I never led as a person that couldn't ask questions. The Bible said, no, that get understanding. So I was going to get understanding. What the heck is going on? How did I get here? And how do I not come back? So from scratch was literally reestablishing everything I believed, everything I thought I wanted. And I had to walk that. So before God would send me James Watson, I had to walk with God. I had to walk through the pain. I had to deal with it, because what could not happen was that James Watson paid for everything before him. It was not his fault. But I also had to be prepared to be his friend, which meant sacrificing some things and being able to say to him, I'm not going to sleep with you, because I'm not going to be your next conquest. Either we're going to build a future, or we're going to just go ahead and we're going to kick it as friends. I had to know what I wanted, because a lot of people don't know what they want. I had to know how to communicate that to him in a way that I was willing to say, I love me enough to tell you what I want and not compromise that. How do I communicate that? How do I learn how to talk? I had to learn from scratch. I grew up in a household I grew up in an abusive household. So I had to learn how not to fight. All of those, everything about me had to start from scratch. Old, new, and be prepared for the new thing. And so that's what a lot of people have to do. Are you prepared for the new thing? I had to deal with my now before I could handle my next. He was my next, but I had to deal with my right thing and my right now. And all the ideals that didn't line up with what God had for me. So it was literally a preparation process. And God knew what was coming. God knew who was coming. And I had to be prepared for him. And so God prepared me to be his wife, because I didn't need to be the wife to anybody else. I need to be the wife to James Watson. Y'all still looking at me. Y'all want to don't do it. I feel some stuff in my
Listen, nose. Dr. King, listen. So much there. For some of us, this journey means going back and putting all the ingredients of our lives on the table, and starting to say, oh, that flour is bad. Okay, that needs to get thrown out. Oh, I need to go grab some more joy that needs to come to the like some of us need to. It is a deconstructing of who we have become in the midst of our pain and in the midst of our trauma and all of those other things that happen in the course of our lives, and becoming who we are intended to be. And so you helped us see really very clearly how to do that. But you said something, that I want not just single folks to hear, because this applies even if even if it's a job or something else that you're going after. But you said God asked you sort of what you wanted, but also what you didn't want. Because sometimes we see what we want, and because we haven't given enough thought to what we know there are some things that I just don't like. I just don't want. And if we haven't spent enough time identifying what we like, what we want, what we don't like, what we can't tolerate, when what we like shows up, we won't spend enough time investigating to see if all the things that we don't like are also present. Instead, we say, "Oh, well, I like it. It was blue. Let me take it." We didn't realize that it's battery operated and we can't plug it in. It's all the things other things that we needed, that we wanted with it, are not present, but we accept it because we saw the thing that we like. And if we would just pause for a moment, that requires patience, that requires pausing, that requires reflection, that requires knowing ourselves. And you said some of us don't know ourselves. We don't even know what we want yet. And so we don't need nothing yet. We don't need it. We need to sit back for a minute to figure out who we are and what we actually want out of this thing. So I don't know how long we got past the Bradford. So I'm gonna come again. But you have helped us, and that prophetic thing you put by the window, just keep looking at it, because we might need you to say something before we get off the Zoom.
Yeah. You mentioned understanding and saying and hearing God say that I might have to partner what you want with what you don't want for just a season to see if you're able to endure what you don't want to get what you want. And that was just amazing, because so many people toss the water out, the baby out with the bath water, because it ain't all together. But Law Gordon, I see you back, and I want to put that question on with you too now.
I think the devil just does not want me to talk tonight.
Well, you talk, you talk now. Talk. What did from scratch look like for you?
So you know what? That is such a loaded question, because I think from scratch for me started before I lost my husband, before I met my husband, probably 10 years before I met my husband, I dated a widow. And I still reflect back now on when I met him, how there were so many accusations of what I was doing before I ever met the man. Because we started dating shortly after he lost a spouse. And initially we weren't even dating, we were friends. But people don't think a male and a female can be friends and there not be something going on. So there were so many accusations in that relationship. But what I learned from dating someone who lost a spouse was that people are going to say what they're going to say, but you have to block those people out. So here I was, not even a minister yet, not a pastor, but not even a preacher. But God put me in a position to help this person who lost his spouse, who I later ended up dating for many years. Didn't marry him. And what's crazy is I dated him until I heard God say, it's time to move on, new beginnings. And I said to him, you know what? I've been in this too long. It's time to go. And when I walked away, it was not long that God allowed my husband to walk into my life. And we were married for 6 years. But when my husband died, it's almost like because I had gone through that with him, I kind of knew some of what to expect. And I decided when my husband died, it was amazing because God set me, God prepared me. If there's such a thing. I had been fasting and praying before my husband died. He wasn't sick. Looked like a picture of health. Went to work one night, sitting at his desk, had a massive heart attack, died. I got the phone call. I mean, it was just like that. But it was almost as if God had prepared me for the phone call, because even when the phone call came, I had a peace about it. And after hearing his death, I decided, even, while I was dealing with it and processing it, even at the funeral, one of the things people said is, how can you be smiling? And the only words that would come from my mouth were, the joy of the Lord is my strength. And it wasn't because I was quoting scripture. I literally had the joy of the Lord on the inside that was carrying me through the entire process. And so, and then I remember even during the funeral and shortly thereafter, my brother-in-law, my husband's brother, saying to me, Michelle, you're a young woman and you have to keep on living. For me, that was affirming, because oftentimes it's your in-laws that you got to worry about. Am I going to be able to go ahead and see? Some people didn't know this, but my husband wasn't a sickly person. And I heard Bishop Watson say, he wasn't a man who went to the doctor. My husband wasn't a sickly person, but my husband wasn't a man who would go to the doctor. His words to me were, I'm not going to the doctor because they're not going to tell me what I'm going to eat. They're not going to tell me what I'm going to drink. They're not going to tell me what I do, because I'm going to live my best life. And when I die, you can live yours. And I would say to him, that is such a selfish thing to say. You don't want to go get a checkup. And, we know Black men are notorious for not wanting to go to the doctor and just see what's going on. My husband may not have died of a heart attack had he just taken the time to go and get the checkup. But he said to me, I'm going to live my best life. And when I die, you can live yours. And you know what I said when he died? And I said it to people. I said, my husband died, but I didn't. For some people, that may seem selfish, but I wasn't being selfish. He died. And I told him, you're selfishly saying that. But at the end of the day, he died. I didn't. And I chose to continue living. And because I knew what I went through in that relationship when I dated a widower, I already knew what to expect and what might come. And sure enough, because I remember when I dated this man, somebody saying to me, well, he should have at least waited 6 months before he tried to talk to you. And my response was, where's that in the Bible? I know we have these things that we think people should do, but where in the Bible does it say that there's a month or 6 months or 12 months or 5 years that you should wait before you move on? The vows that we take say till death do us part. And whether that death is a day later, a week later, a month later, or a year later, if Jesus came that we might have life and have it more abundantly, why is it that there's this notion that the person who is left is supposed to play dead until other people are ready to see them live again? And so for me, my from scratch was, I'm going to keep on living until I die. And I'm not going to live for people. And I'm not going to allow people to hold me hostage with what it is they think I should do. I'm going to live my best life. I'm no longer married, which means I'm single. I'm a widow, but I'm single. And if I want to go on a date, I'm going. If I want to sit at home, I'm going to sit at home. I continued, and I didn't even stop preaching. My husband died on the Sunday, and I didn't preach that day, on a Monday, but the next Sunday after he died, I preached. Now, there are some people who said, oh, you were in denial and you need to heal and you need to, but you know what? Everybody processes grief differently. For me, my therapy was to continue preaching. And I also write. I write for my newspaper, and I would write what I was dealing with. And it was amazing because I actually was getting letters from people who were reading my editorials, thanking me for sharing my journey through grief with them. So for me, it was therapeutic, and I've never been in denial. And I say to people, and I even said it to my pastor just today, I'm a wounded healer, but I do realize I have not completely healed. But just because I'm not completely healed doesn't mean I can't help somebody through their process, because I'm healing as I go. But my from scratch was the conscious decision to keep on living and not allow people to tell me how to do it.
Somebody ought to be running around on that right there. Often when we experience death, the expectation is that we die with them, that we die with our parent, that we die with our spouse, that we die with our child. I mean, these are some tremendous losses, right? We can't sugarcoat the fact that it's a heavy loss, and we did not die, right? And so What does it mean for me to live and to process in ways that are authentic to me? Because you said that you were smiling. Well, guess what? Some people do smile. Some people do have joy after a loss. Some people have relief. Some people experience anger and there's a whole array of emotions that one can experience after they experience a loss. And so, thank you for helping us see that it is not a one size fits all experience. But if nothing else, if you're watching, if nothing else, please know this. We know that you love the person. We know that you love Big Mama. We know that you loved Auntie. We know that you love Cousin John. We know that you love them. We know it. We know it. You know it. When they took their last breath, you did not take yours. You are still here. God intended for you to be here in this moment, then live. Right? Live. And so what does that look like? Processing in ways that are natural and authentic to us. That could be journaling, which is a way of processing our grief. It could be pausing and sitting in silence, which is a way of processing our grief. It could be saying, you know what? We're taking a sabbatical as a church, which is a way of processing our grief. It could be recognizing that, you know what? I'm starting to settle, not just in my anger, but my anger is becoming bitterness. That's a way of processing our grief. It could be laying everything bare on the table. I call it getting naked to get free. That's a way of processing our grief. And it could be deciding that I'm not going to put myself in positions, in places that re-traumatize me. That's a way of processing our grief. All of us are doing it differently. There is no right or wrong way to do it. You got to get your healing, but know that when they took their last breath, when the relationship took its last breath, when the job took its last breath, you did not take yours. So what you going to do now that you still have breath in your body? I see you, Pastor Napoleon. Go ahead, jump on in.
No, man, you've led us to our final question, our final statement, right? You have ushered us into the close, which is simply this, because we're looking in squares of survivors, right? Each square represents a survivor. You've survived whatever it was that has been deemed a loss, whether it be divorce or death. And the question that I want to leave with you as you leave with the people who are watching is how what words of encouragement do you have for them to ensure their survival? What are you going to say to the people watching to ensure that they don't stop breathing just because whatever situation they were in stopped breathing? Nikki, I know you got to go because you got to pick up my nephew. So go ahead and start us off. What advice? And you're new, right? But you're still breathing. So what advice do you have?
Keep living, take one day at a time, and just be ready for what that day holds, but at the same time, never lose your focus with God.
Thank you. Thank you. Janine.
The hardest thing that you will ever have to do is start from scratch, restart from scratch. When it seems like everything and everyone else around you, they're prospering and they're happy and they're loving and they're being loved on. We have to understand that everything has its point and its purpose, and everything that comes to you is not meant to destroy you or to kill you or to do anything like that. But I will say this. My mom said this to me when I was contemplating leaving my last marriage. And she simply said Matthew 7:6. Do not give dogs what is sacred. Do not throw your pearls to pigs. If you do, They may trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces. Be better than what your circumstance is, and know that you are worth a restart if that's what God is telling you.
Amen. Amen. Yania.
My encouragement to the body of Christ tonight would be to never give up, regardless of your circumstances, experiences, or situations. Um, Give yourself grace to grow and trust God. Tune out the opinions of those that are not qualified, but give yourself grace to grow and just keep going and never quit. Do not allow your experiences or the circumstances to stop you where you are. Just keep going, never quit, and give yourself grace. Be kind to yourself, love yourself, accept the love that God is giving you, and keep going and never quit.
Amen. Keep going. Keep going. Michelle.
Oh, here we go. Definitely say live until you die. Don't die while you're still alive. Live until you die, because often so many dead men walking. Live till you die. Keep pressing, keep pushing, keep loving yourself and allow yourself to be loved.
Mm. Live until you die. I love it. I love it. I love it. James Watson.
Yes, sir. If I could give a closing statement of excitement and joy for the people that have been watching, I would just simply say, give yourself credit that you did not crash. Give yourself credit that Christ collected all the broken, scattered pieces, put you back together again, and he gave you he gave you more than love to get you back on the road of success again. Give yourself credit that you did not crash.
I'm so glad you out the cave, my brother. God, I'm so glad you are out the cave. You just don't understand. You just don't understand. Give yourself credit that you did not crash. God almighty. God almighty. Key, I can tell by the smile on your face that you glad he out the cave too. So go ahead and give us some parting words.
Well, if he out the cave, I can go in now, right? But my final comments to those that have shared sacred space with us is be willing to heal. There has to be a willingness to heal, so that you're not the victim twice. If you refuse to heal, then you become a victim twice. So be willing to heal. And whatever that healing process looks like, you have to be willing to heal, or you're going to be stuck where you are.
Jay.
Listen, I just wrote down what they said. So I don't I don't know that we need to really add. There's nothing to add to what they said, because they gave us a full answer when you put all of their responses together. I do want to pull what Pastor Wilkins said, though, because in this process of doing everything that everyone has told us, right, to give ourselves, to take one day at a time, to be willing to heal. Healing, y'all, there's a quote from the Salt Eaters, and it's in two different sections, but it says, "Are you sure, sweetheart, that you want to be healed? Just so you're sure, sweetheart, and ready to be healed, because wholeness is no trifling matter. A lot of weight when you're well." That to me goes back to what Dr. Key said, right? You have to, it's intentional healing, and you got to be willing to do sometimes the work of healing. But all of what everybody said, be willing to give ourselves a restart, right? Thank Jesus, thank God that we did not give ourselves credit for not crashing, right? That we have enough in us to get back on the road again, all of that. But all of that, if we place just on top of it, what Pastor Wilkins said, and that is give ourselves grace through the process. So with all of the folks said in the space, all of the wisdom that has been deposited in this space, because you're not going to always get it right every day. Some days the healing work going to be too, you going to say, I ain't doing that today. I'm not calling them today. I'm not going there today. I'm not, some days you're not going to start. If we're willing and able to give ourselves the same grace that God gives us, if we can give ourselves grace in those moments, then I do believe that we're going to be all right on the other side of this thing. And so thank you all. Thank you, Pastor Napoleon, for inviting me into the space to just glean. Y'all see my notebook. I got some notes from all of what you have shared in the space. May we all leave this space knowing that healing is possible, that healing is available, that God wants us healed and whole, and that it is a participatory event, that it does not happen without our activity with God in this process. We do this thing with God. So, Pastor, I'll turn it over to you.
I just want to thank everyone for being willing to be vulnerable, for being willing to share, for even as Yania said, after 10 years, being able to tell some of the story, right, out loud. It's not by accident that you are here, and the help you're giving is going to far outlive these minutes we've been together. For those that are watching, this is not a topic, and it was mentioned earlier in the chat, that is often talked about because still, just like in biblical days, they don't know what to do with widows, and they've always demonized divorce, right? And as a result, these topics go unmentioned. It was in Acts that a call came out because the Hellenistic widows, the Jews, the Hellenistic widows were not being cared for. And can I say in 2022, the widows are still not being cared for. And those who are divorced have often been damned. But the reality is, because it was the end of that season, it's not the end of your life. And we have to galvanize and curate spaces where we can do the hard work of starting over so that we don't get stuck in the suffering and in the sadness of that past season. Because it was just a season. It was a season, but you're living beyond it. So again, I thank each and every one of you from the deepest part of my heart. I pray God's richest blessings on each of you who were panelists, as well as those who are watching. We're preparing for a holiday season that is not going to be happy for everyone. But I do understand, and I need you to understand, that in the midst of sadness, remember that while you are sad and may go through sadness, you also should celebrate survival. And that's hard to do sometimes at the same time. But you grieve how you need to grieve without feeling forced to grieve a certain way because someone else is grieving the way they grieve. This is your story, and you have the ability to write it how you need to write it. So I'm
Dr.
closing.
Bradford,
Go
can I
ahead.
just say one thing, and I'm so sorry. Listening to you right now, God just told me, and this is for my divorced people, I got married in death. Even though I stood before a preacher, I still got married in death, but I was revived in new life. There's still hope.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So again, thank you all. Please, please, we're going to share this. I pray other people watch it. We're going to replay it. I thank you for your willingness to be on this panel. Thank you for the life you're going to save, because this is life-saving stuff. And y'all have an amazing night.
Thank you.